I was making the point that in order to have a real alliance of civilizations, we need to do it on the basis of shared values. And we actually have those shared values on paper, because almost 60 years ago, very visionary people came together, and they came from different parts of the world, from China, from Lebanon, from Chile, from Canada, from France, under the chairmanship of Eleanor Roosevelt, and drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Every single government in the world supports the Universal Declaration. They don't question that it is the fundamental document of international human rights. But we don't have a shared sense of human rights. It's become very conflicted. When you address an audience, even the audience I was speaking to yesterday, when I say the words human rights, people hear it differently. And they're not comfortable about it because it has been used selectively, with double standards, and it doesn't very often include the whole important range of human rights. Rights to food and safe water and health and education and shelter, as well as freedom of expression, freedom of religion, right to life itself, of course, no torture, and so on. And countries accuse each other without admitting they have problems. So we have all these issues. But I think the framing of the Alliance of Civilizations is a good place to discuss, frankly and honestly, that we need to get back to the commitment. And I mentioned that since I've now become an elder, which was a big shock to me, with Nelson Mandela's elders, a small group of us, we have embraced the idea that elders should remind the world of its values. And we take it as being very fortuitous that we have the 60th anniversary this year, 2008, leading up to the 10th of December. And we have a very broad campaign involving many organizations month by month. So I think that's the most important thing. Gathered here, we had those who are representative of different viewpoints, and including, I'm glad to see, a lot of young people. But we are lucky to be here. How do we reach the millions who can't participate in this conference? And yesterday, when I was moderating the media panel, we were very much discussing that. And how do we break down the barriers of the sense of how much our language distorts meaning in our world? The constant reference to Islamic terrorist seeming to brand a whole region of the world. And there was a lot of unhappiness about that. And I think the Alliance of Civilizations has to tackle that. We also have to recognize that if we're serious about not using violence for our purposes, and there was a very strong commitment to that, then there must be more outspoken condemnation when violence is used, and outspoken condemnation from within the communities where some individuals have used violence. So it's necessary on different sides to be more open. But I think we had a good discussion in the panel yesterday about the way in which this so-called war on terrorism has been very negative. I was still serving in the United Nations as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights at the time of the terrible attacks of 9/11. And I pleaded at that time that the response should be, these are crimes against humanity. Bring the perpetrators to justice. Yes, it was legitimate to go into Afghanistan in that context because they refused, the Taliban wouldn't surrender Osama bin Laden and his associates. But instead we had this broad-based war on terrorism that became a kind of war that disregarded human rights standards, that was very had a sort of blanket approach to those of Muslim background living in the United States, and many of them were deported without any consideration of due process, etc. And thus the whole atmosphere changed almost overnight, and it has done a lot of damage, and it has squeezed moderates and made them feel, very conflicted about how they were being viewed and judged. And I think we underestimate how damaging that has been, especially for young people who see the images of themselves so negatively reflected. I think, first of all, and quite simply, opening up an honest dialogue, and in particular listening. I do feel that there is a lack of taking the time to listen to people who feel exactly as you've described, and who want to somehow get out of this place that they have been placed in by the language that they see and the images that they see very often on the media. I also think we need to tackle some of the underlying divides that are very real, such as one that I care greatly about, the lack of employment for young people in the large population poorer countries where the demographic bulge is happening and the jobs are not there. And you have people trying to migrate to Europe and become probably undocumented migrants with all the problems of going into a sort of underground that implies, that aggravates the problem. So I was glad that Sheikh Moza announced her project for very strong support, $100 million, particularly focused on job creation for young people. And I have agreed to serve on that board because I really want it to be seen as a human right. We will not tackle poverty unless we recognise the right to work and the responsibility, including a corporate responsibility this century, to do more about employment creation, not making profits by job cutting, but especially in developing countries.